that every high school has a valedictorian, and they all have perfect GPAs and extracurriculars and SAT scores, and who cares? Because they were looking for some real people. So that stuck in my head for a couple of years, and then, I did my thing. I applied for transfer to Stanford, and then I got in, and it was like the hardest thing I ever did in my entire life. No big deal. And then I got here, and it was my first day, like my first day at Stanford, and I came to my first lecture, and another one of those little things got stuck in my head, and it was my, oh my gosh, it was literally on this stage, it was in this theater, and the professor says, "So you're taking an art history class at Stanford. Everyone's gonna think you're a snob for the rest of your life." And I was like, okay, I don't think anyone's ever applied that word I would never think of myself as a snob, ever. And so I was like, hold up. I mean, I didn't actually raise my hand in the middle of my very first lecture at Stanford. That would have been mortifying. But I was like, in my head, I was like, dude. And I looked around at all of these little babies who had just come from their prep schools. And I was like, you could maybe call them snobs. But you don't know me. So, interesting fact, my people are hillbillies from the hollers of Kentucky. You know the kind of people who use the word y'all, right? That's not them. No, my people are like deeper than that. We say yuns. You ones. Which ones? Yuns. Yeah, they're super classy in my family. So, why is this important, right? I'm about to explain to you how it is that thing that made me feel so weird and different sitting in this group of people out in this theater is what actually makes me, and probably yuns, really powerful people in research. Now, I've always been interested in research, even when it was like, I was in another life doing entertainment industry, whatever. Had nothing to do with psychology. And I had all these questions all the time. And I would look for answers. I could never find the answers to my questions, never the specific one. And I always wondered, why? How come no one asked that question yet? And it turns out people research what they know. And they research what interests them. And they research what they can get funded. And that's a different talk altogether. But they hadn't had my life experience. And so they asked different questions, and I realized that if I wanted the answers to my questions, I was gonna have to roll my sleeves up and find them myself, much in the way that you all have done. Because just like me, your brain works in a very different way, a distinct way, and so we need your questions. Among other things, here at Stanford, I study cultural psychology, which means that I can tell you a little bit about how socioeconomic status, class, gender, religion, race, ethnicity, sexuality, immigrant status, first-generation status, all these things interact. And they make your experience in your environment and between your ears really totally distinct. And I can tell you with certainty that your contributions are different. You are all a group of diverse and probably not terribly privileged individuals. And the truth is, traditionally, those people who have done research for centuries have been individuals whose personhood and psyches have been forged in some pretty cushy circumstances. And since that wasn't the case for me, and I'm willing to bet that's not the case for most of you, we are in a really unique position here in the academy. I didn't know that's what the snobs were calling it before I got here. But we we have a really interesting vantage point from which to view the world that our colleagues in the universities, who started out there, maybe, they can never know it. They can read about it, and they can study it, but we live it. And according to the experts, one of whom I work under in the Spark Lab, Dr. Hazel Marcus, the woman who pretty much invented cultural psychology, no big deal. According to Hazel and everybody else doing this work, we, Yuns, are the people who are going to be asking the questions that have the potential to actually change the courses of the societies that we live in. When I was 17, my mom died in a car accident, and I gotta tell you, it's pretty rough doing life without your mom. But I was fortunate enough to meet a woman named Terry, who had also lost her mother pretty young, and she was roughly my mom's age, and so Terry was my mentor for a lot of years after my mom died, and Terry's voice likes to float around in my head an awful lot. And one of the things that she says to me quite often is, Dee Dee, nobody's gonna know you're here unless you tell them. Now think about that. You guys all have a gift. Your experience is your gift. The thing that makes you different, the thing that you're trying to maybe hide from the world right now, that's your gift. It's your story, and you're gonna have to tell it. Not just in an application that you fill out on paper, and not just at some speech thing that David Learman asks you to come and do. Thank you, David. But you're gonna have to tell this story through your choices. Which university you attend, which major you choose, which internships you pursue, which research you conduct. And I am continually reminded through my research in cultural psychology how to tell my story by calling up all of that stuff that makes me kind of a weirdo and bringing it right into the research with me. Because nobody's gonna know I'm here if I don't tell them. Nobody is gonna know these issues need attention if I don't tell them. And so I hear Terry's words, and every time I'm tempted to forego that opportunity to tell my story because I think it's gonna be too hard, or too personal, or too radical, I do it anyway. And you all are gonna have to do that too. You have an obligation to do that because nobody's gonna know you're here unless you tell them. And so your job now, as if you didn't know this already, is to go and dig up that thing that makes you a weirdo, dig up that story, and you go tell it. Because guess what? You're here now. Probably guess it. You have arrived. All right. Thank you so much.